to order the regular meeting, school board of District 52. We'll start with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Thornton, I do have a late addition to the agenda.
Okay.
Under our consent agenda, under B, new hires. If we could add Shayla Diaz, high school special education department teacher
Okay. For next year.
for next year, correct?
All right. Any other agenda items, changes? Well, we'll ask for an approval.
I'll move to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I said it.
We'll recognize that Rick's not here tonight.
Excuse.
Missing- Excused. Okay, and we'll move on to delegations, Mr. Peterson.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Thornton. I would like to introduce Mr. Peck and Ms. Thomas from our intermediate school, and they've got some special guests and their families who are going to give the board some very timely information.
Good evening. So I'm Mr. Peck. I've been teaching out here 16 years, and this year I took on a new role. I'm a host teacher, and Mrs. Thomas I was blessed with her, and she is amazing with science. And she brought this amazing STEAM project to our class. And we invited Mr. Peterson. He came and just loved it. So he asked us to bring a couple of students, and they're going to be here to talk to you guys and show you their project.
Good evening. Coming into this role as a student teacher was very exciting and presented a lot of great new opportunities to which Mr. Peck just let me fly, and I'm so grateful for that. When I came into this, our kids had a very challenging past couple of years where life just seemed to stop. And I wanted to remind them that we're always moving forward, and I wanted to challenge them to what we can discover next. On December 26, 2021, James Webb Telescope launched. It is the biggest, most powerful telescope to be put into space. And on March 17th, the first image was received. It was recreated from what was a pixelated, blurry mess to now a revealing, beautiful, detailed infrared image. From this, I had invited our students to create their own mission. And today, my first guest will be Jose, and he will tell you about his mission.
Jose. I am a fourth grader in Mr. Peck's classroom. I created a telescope called Project Uncovered. Its mission is to go explore black holes. I hope that we can discover a new galaxy and find other light. The estimated cost is $2.2 billion. The design was approved by Systems Director Ms. Thomas and Program Manager Mr. Peck. Are there any questions?
When does it launch?
When does yours launch? We want to know about yours.
This is just a prototype.
Yeah.
Yes, so Mr. Jose had created this wonderful telescope that allows you to view into and see a black hole. His original design was very good. He had it put up against a window so that you could peer and it would be very bright. Second to come up will be Mr. Hudson.
Hello, my name is Hudson Hintz, and I'm from room 108. I'm proposing a mission for a ship, the Explorer, funded by NASA, for a cool cost of $2.5 thousand. The mission is to find other allies to help get better technology. I believe this will make a better world, a better place, and I'm hoping for your support. By the way, I never liked astronauts. They always think they're above us.
That's nice.
You're right.
Hudson, tell me again, what's that called?
The Explorer.
Well, you sold me a really good price.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like that price tag.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No prevailing wage there. Yeah.
Oh, sadly, my partner couldn't make it. Jaden Hernandez.
Good job.
On behalf of Room 108, thank you so much for allowing us to be here and present a couple of our possible missions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add one last thing. This is just the beginning of these projects. Our plan next year is to go even bigger and turn it into like a STEAM night so that we can have parents come and kids can really, all the kids can do what they did tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
But I would like to add, you know, I was fortunate enough to be able to go and see all of the projects. And quite frankly, any one of the kids did well enough to where they could have been before the board. I really applaud these guys. It's a little nerve wracking, of course, speaking in front of a bunch of people you don't know. However, I can say that to a person, as I went around the room, they gave an enormous amount of detail on exactly why they were designing the mission that they were designing. They were just fantastic. So kudos to Mr. Peck and Mrs. Thomas.
Well, thank you. Where are you teaching from, Mrs. Thomas? Which school?
I was student teaching here. My official last day was last Monday, and now I am patiently waiting to officially become a Chi teacher.
But are you out of Central or?
No, WGU.
Okay,
nice.
okay, thank you. All right. Well, we will move on to our proposed consent agenda. Do we have any questions? I see some additions at the bottom. Teaching of endorsement, is that
Correct.
a formality?
Yeah, these are people that when, if you've heard Mona talking about the equity report that we need to prepare every year, these are just people who were out of their endorsed areas. In some cases have been teaching in that area for a number of years, but don't meet the qualifications for the new requirements.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Good job.
Here you
It's for her son, the 4-year-old.
Yes, he got to see it and fell in love with the satellite.
go.
Any questions?
I don't know.
Any comments? Yep. Good. Well, the chair would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Aye. Passes. We will move on to public comments then. Board recognizes the value of public comments. Any
No
electronic? Going twice. Okay. And we will move on to unfinished business. Looks like elementary school discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. Just a quick update. As the board is aware, we've begun the process to bring our primary and intermediate school back under the same banner. I had a good meeting with the elementary school staff, the combined K-5 staff. Went over the justification, some of the history behind it as I went over the board. So right now, what we're in the process of doing, I've spoken with our facilities regional manager with OSPI, who I got to admit, he was very honest and upfront with me in saying he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. In fact, as you know, as I've stated over the course of the pandemic, OSPI, much like any other school district, has seen an enormous amount of turnover. He was unaware of any of the requirements of, or quite frankly, what was a priority school designation back in the day. However, he hooked me up with a technical support through Cedars. So together, he's learning something new. I'm getting to the bottom of it. From the staffing standpoint, from the administrative standpoint, we're full speed ahead. And then Phil, who's in Vancouver, and I and the Cedars technician to be named later are going to finagle all of the specific pieces to get things going in the background. Quite frankly, the biggest piece of this was with Ms. Hanson, as well as with the staff, just to make sure they understood the why behind going back as one TK5 building. So it's moving along as it should, and I don't foresee any hiccups, quite frankly.
Any questions, comments?
Congratulations.
Good luck. Okay, then we'll move to the facility planning group.
Yes, thank you once again. Facilities Planning Group update. Our first meeting for this group will be this Thursday at 4 o'clock. And Mr. Thornton, I know you were a part of that group. You haven't received the invitation yet, but I did confirm with my community member that he is available.
Okay.
So that's going to be sent out later tonight. The first meeting of the Facilities Planning Group will be to schedule and calendar our events throughout the summer, create a timeline of when we'd like to see a recommendation made and a report made to the board as a whole. Also inclusive in that group from the standpoint of district people, we've included Dan Adamson, we've included Ms. Hanson, and I will open it up to any other staff members who are interested in it. But primarily getting some folks from our community was really one of the higher priorities. So, and I appreciate your willingness to work on that committee. If you are unable to attend in person, of course, please, we will have Zoom set up, have a probably this very setup, meet in the boardroom, and you'll be able to log in and listen. Like I said, the first meeting is primarily set the calendar and goals and objectives, what we want to achieve, and the time frame to do it. So it's nice to finally be able to say, okay, we've got a couple of people who are willing to help out. And quite frankly, at this point, it's just going to go forward. We want more people, we'll always take more people, but we just need to go. So that really is the only update I have on that.
So 4 o'clock Thursday,
4 o'clock Thursday,
right here, probably.
right here in the boardroom.
Okay. I'll be here. All right, then let's move on to new business, our CTE 4-year plan.
And I'm just getting the documents. There we go. So this plan that you see was created by our CTE director in conjunction with our principals. Talks about, quite frankly, the nuts and bolts. And you, as some members of the board know, and as we've got new members that don't, this is a yearly occurrence. This is a 4-year plan to dot the i's and cross the t's from a funding standpoint. Later in my presentation, I will be asking the board to consider some options for some workshops here in June. So if it so pleases the board, we can definitely take a look at bringing in Keely Gant, who's our CTE director, through the co-op of the ESD. As you go through the plan, you can see it simply is meeting the legal criteria for each of the different areas and making sure that we're in compliance. The actual offerings that we're able to do can change between now and the start of the school year. And they certainly will change over the course of the full 4 years, as this is an ever evolving 4-year plan. Obviously, we don't wait 4 years in between. It's updated annually. But I know there are some specific topics that we would like to review. And quite frankly, as we're in the planning stages of staffing at the high school, there are some classes that could potentially be offered that we haven't offered before, in which case almost immediately from the outset, the 4-year plan kind of gets updated and will be reflected in next year's 4-year plan with those new offerings. So with that, I'm simply asking the board for approval of our CTE 4-year plan, formerly called the district-wide plan. And we'll speak on this a little bit more later.
Any comments, discussion?
That was gonna be my question, is whether or not this precludes or binds us to anything, and you answered that. So yeah, look forward to discussing it more in a workshop.
Okay.
Well, the chair would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve the CTE 4-year plan.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll move on to academic standards and assessment report.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Thornton. I'm going to invite, after I put the podium back up to adult height.
Well, not too tall.
or- Let's go with that. I'm going to invite Joni Ashley to speak first. Joni took on the role of district assessment coordinator this year. And quite frankly, as a person who's held that role in another district, I know the challenges that come with it. And Joni's done an exceptional job. And so one of the things that I mentioned to the board during our agenda meeting is the wonderful part about 2020 hindsight. When we came up with our board policy and we put down that May would be the perfect month to be speaking about assessments or initial assessment results. Of course, what we didn't take into account, and I will say I didn't take into account, is the fact that many of our assessments are still in the process of going on. And I'll speak more to that later. As we move forward, this is going to be a more appropriate discussion in June as opposed to May. And I'm sure Joni will be talking about that a little bit, and I certainly will follow up, okay? But I'd first like to introduce Joni Ashley, and she's going to go over our DIBELS information for you.
I would like to second his proposal of putting this off until June. As I'm testing SBAC, I had MAP testing going on, I had SBAC testing going on, and then this afternoon, I'm literally inputting different scores and then trying to figure out one's growth. I was late coming here because these are hot off the presses. I did not leave school, I did not go home, my husband was texting me, are you gonna fix dinner later? I said no. So, okay. Our DIBELS data is not great, and but it's not bad. Most of our students show growth. Whether that growth for some kiddos was 2 months or 22 months, just about every one of them showed growth. We had only a handful of students, and they tended to be new to country, Spanish-speaking students who showed little or no growth at all over our 9 months. I'm not going to read all of this to you because you obviously can read yourself, but I wanted to make some points out that our first and second graders for the last 2 years, I mean, this is their first year of school from start to finish, with no interruptions, no online half days, whatever. Our first and second graders also, when they were TK and kindergarten, and we left to go out online and everything, there were no computers for them. It was strictly packets. And so when you have parents who are trying to teach and work or try to struggle at keeping all their kids at home and whatever during the pandemic, you can probably understand why our scores are the way they are. Our third graders, it's a little bit better. But again, they were kindergartners the last time they had a full 9 months of school. That was not interrupted. What some of the trends that we have, that I'm asking why, and given more time, we'll do a deeper dive into these, is the number of our students that literally grow a year or more, but are still 1 to 2 years behind grade level. I mean, these little kiddos by fourth and fifth grade are working their little tails off. And we have 38% of our fourth graders who made a year or more growth still be 2 years below grade level. So they're that far behind. Things that I want to discover for that is absenteeism. That's huge in our school. There's so many days where we go to pull a kid to test or to work with or to do core with, and they're absent. How many of these are our second language learners? Studies show that second language learners need like 5-6 years of schooling before they truly cognitively can understand what the teacher is actually saying and stuff. So there's lots of whys and what ifs. Can't just cry over it because we do have good news. Most everybody grew, just not the way we wanted them to. So that's the Devils, and it kind of correlated with our math scores as well, which I'll let Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Joni. So one of the real aha moments for me, not the least of which was over the weekend trying to determine why such an easy report, which this is not, wouldn't load and wouldn't print. And what we discovered was, I'm talking with Joni and then talking with Northwest Education Associates, who are the people behind the MAP scores. Because we still had open test windows, it wouldn't let us do the district summaries that we were hoping to get for the board. So this is really part one of another discussion that's going to happen at another board meeting, where we are able to show not simply what this report shows, and this is a report of all of our kids, grades 1 through 9, and what their spring scores were, and where that puts them into quintiles. So by 20%, so your lowest 20%, your low average, average, above average, exceptional. What this does is shows really a snapshot of where they're at right now. But what I want to be able to show the board, and where I will concur absolutely with what Joni was saying earlier, is our focus really needs to be, once the MAP window is closed, on showing where we can see each individual kid from a beginning point and an end point to show the growth that occurred over the fall to spring testing window. The other thing that this showed, in fact, this led to a conversation with not only Joni, but with Kim and with Lisa Stady, was something that was reflected in DIBELS. It's reflected here. And that is a repercussion of, quite frankly, our kids being at such a low level to begin with. They didn't make, if you just pay attention to the quintiles, if you just look, for instance, at the burgundy, which is the lowest quintile. When we go from fall to spring, we actually see an increase in the numbers in that lowest quintile. And what was more strange until we talked through this was the idea that as you go up the chain, as you go from first grade to second grade, third grade to fourth grade to fifth grade, you saw those gaps increase. And it was substantiated by the Dibble scores, which reflected virtually the same type of anomalies. And so while we were able to talk through the idea that Joni was speaking of, that most of our kids, almost all of them, made growth of some sort, how did we end up with those kids, an additional number of kids in the lower quintiles? Well, what we did is we pulled out some research that Lisa had done when she was still teaching fifth grade. And we know that Kybe students in particular have a larger summer loss than the national norms. So these results are according to national norms. And what you see is when you look at the map data and the actual RIT score, a fourth grader, for instance, in the fall actually has a lower RIT score than a third grader at the end of their year. And they take that into account to try and balance some of that summer loss. Well, when you have a first grader, a second grader, who then ends up, let's say, with a 2-month gap in first grade, if you do nothing but meet the projection at the end of their second grade, they're a 4-month gap. At the end of 3, they're a 6-month, and so on up the chain. So that was why we were seeing our 4th and 5th grade actually with a higher deficit because their starting point was so low, they were never able to catch up completely. Now, the other thing that Joni said that was very important, and she made a perfect reference to it, was when we're talking about our students who are ELL, oftentimes that takes 4, 5, 6 years for them to gain any sort of academic fluency. When you look then at the middle school scores, you see that lower quintile, and we all know middle school's a rough time in kids' academic history anyway, but all of a sudden we start to see higher gains. So we can see that as some kids gain that level of fluency in the content area classrooms, they're responding more appropriately when we're testing them. And that's where you see that gap finally turning around a little bit, and it has everything to do with language fluency. So these are, quite frankly, just a snapshot of all of our kids, their spring scores. And then once the window closes at the end of the year, it's literally a matter of pressing a button and we'll be able to compare the kids themselves fall and spring, be able to show that growth not attached to the national norms. Because that's what one of the things that we brought in our MAP assessment to do was to be able to show that individual growth and not necessarily just the growth against controls. It was fascinating work to be able to look at this, but quite frankly, we really came to the conclusion, all 4 of us, as we were talking this afternoon, that before we even come up with a plan, we need to better understand the why this is happening and really dive deep and probably into some specific teachers' classrooms, go down to that level, and then make some notes and create a plan of how we intend to increase our level of intervention moving forward. So I can with no doubt say this is assessment report part 1 with our more detailed growth data to come at one of our next 2 meetings.
Can I ask a little more?
Absolutely.
Our core program, last year we came and we presented this wonderful core data. We have this wonderful core data, but again, I was so busy getting the Dibble scores in and our core is related to the Dibbles. I just didn't have time. This was June, you'd have it, but I didn't have time to get the core report out. It's like, that's where the kids that grew 2 to 3 years on the Dibbles but are still below grade level, 90% of them are our core kids. And that's where they finally went, aha, I got it, but they're so far behind, we just can't catch up yet. But they will.
And it really led us to one of the things that I've been, even as a former high school English teacher, it was really an epiphany for me when I first realized this probably 6 years ago. Our focus really, if we want to truly change where our 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th is to keep them on, get them and keep them on grade level at TKK 1st, 2nd. And I believe that once we have a better breakdown of these individual growth and where we see successes, where we see some challenges moving ahead, we're going to be able to make a plan to really aim at that level. Much as we talk about at the high school level, so much is dependent upon what happens in middle school. And if you talk to the middle school folks, if so much of what happens there is dependent on elementary, it really, I think the research will back us up that where we focus in our TKK and 1 program are going to be reflective of our middle school and high school grades in years to come.
Would beefing up in our dual language program help? Some of that?
If it's followed correctly and we have buy-in from everybody involved, not just the teachers that are teaching it, but the entire staff, it could very much help. But again, then they're still learning 2 languages at the same time.
But research shows that,
Yeah.
that if we do it correctly, which I think the task force is, we're on track now to get that whole plan and, you know, and really get it going, that research does show that teaching these kids with that language, that primary language, increases their scores as they get into.
They wouldn't fall far behind.
Correct. An ELL student who doesn't have a firm grasp of their primary language will not have a firm grasp of 2nd or 3rd language moving forward.
The other thing that we haven't talked about is, this is all academic and stuff, but the social behaviors of our kinder 1st and 2nd graders with 2 years of, I get to do anything I want, I don't have any controls and stuff. I really believe that is 90% of why our 1st and 2nd grade scores are so low. And I don't have kindergarten scores for you because I just ran out of time. So, but they're not that great either.
Well, I appreciate getting the report and all the data. I mean, that we have the MAP scores. And, you know, this is our first year running the test, and it's a great place to start and to
Yes.
just continue to work on. And
You know, and I've got to jump on that because we started getting a little bit excited when Lisa brought up the fact that, gosh, when we get 2 or 3 years under our belt and then can look at kids longitudinally, potential game changer. But the other thing that we all agreed, as we were sitting there in the RTI portable, we have all thought and made assumptions about what our kids were missing and where they were scoring and why. This is the first time we've taken a systemic look at the real numbers and trying to draw conclusions from it. And quite frankly, for those of us who are a bit of data geeks, as much as I hate to admit it, the potential, I think, is there to be a game changer. And it really, this is the way that we're going to get ourselves out of the hole we're in, and any hole we thought we were in before. We finally have the numbers to say, this is how deep the hole is, this is what it looks like, and this is the plan to get us out. So I'm excited about that.
I feel like we already have some great plans
Yes,
moving in that direction with the new reading curriculum and the dual language committee. And yeah,
agreed.
moving forward.
So are you gonna work on switching this around on that procedure or the policy?
Yes,
So this comes in June next?
yes, we will.
Please.
The ink is barely dry on the policy, but we will be making a change so that when we start the actual second go round next spring, this will definitely be for our late June, if not July meeting.
By then we'll know, we'll have shuffled a couple of it. probably.
Exactly.
All right. And next is our CPC MOU.
Yes.
Okay.
This, while quite frankly, not necessarily requiring board action, I thought would be something that, for lack of a better term, I don't think CBC is often recognized enough as a institution of higher learning, and CBC has now moved forward, and we're the elected recipients of our first student teacher next year of offering a 4-year degree in teaching. And we're with the student teacher coming in, we have to have an MOU in place. I just think it's a tribute to CBC seeing a local need for staff members and trying to address through a locally accredited school of higher learning, trying to address a definite need for us. The director there, Mr. Bang, came up with this MOU. He forwarded it to Bernardo and myself. We made the necessary changes to reflect County of Benton City, and we've just never had an MOU for student teachers before. So I thought it'd be good for the board to see that and recognize that this is the first step in hopefully what is another new pathway for prospective teachers not having to leave the area to get a degree and then hopefully stay with us.
I'm just curious, Pete, if you know, is it just elementary education that they have? Or do they have secondary? It's not, I'm just curious. Because I've heard of it before.
It's just K through 3.
I know that their intention is to eventually go to K-8. But I think at this point, it's focused on the early learning, because that really is, in fact, if you look at some of our own hiring practices, that's where we've probably had the most turnover in the last 4 years. But I think it's a matter of time before not only do they offer through K-8, but I know they are currently working on transitions for secondary to go. Let's say you start at CBC and then you end at WSU Tri-Cities for your secondary certification. But small steps first, and this is the first small step. And that's all I have.
So you don't need approval.
I do not need approval on the MOU, no.
Right. Well, then let's move on to the color guard.
Well, thank you one more time. And for this, the board should have seen a proposal that was presented to me by our music staff. And then kind of a timeline of what they hope to achieve. For those of you who don't know what color guard is, you probably have seen it a million times and not realized it. Anytime you watch a college football game, you see the band out performing and you see the folks in the front with the big 15-foot sticks with silk ribbons tied to them, and they're dancing and prancing and things of that nature. That is color guard. And I've got to tip my hat to our music staff, because while they themselves don't have any personal experience with color guard, they see that as an area where we can get a group of kids who aren't necessarily our athletes, who aren't necessarily even our musicians, but who have some desire to perform. And so they started with a basic camp to try and judge interest. When we were sitting in here the other day, Mr. Cameron would say he was hoping for a couple. We had 17 kids come out and go through the camp and express an interest in turning out if it was seen as being viable. And with 17 kids, it's a viable activity. I think the careful part for them and what they recognize, especially in the first years of what they're proposed to do, is to start with a winter guard, and where that would not be something you see necessarily at halftime of a football game, but starting out in winter in January towards the second half of a basketball season, and doing some camps during the fall to again garner interest, get kids out, and then actually start a program with the idea of doing some exhibitions and performing potentially in some competitive contests then in the spring of 23. As you go on into their second year, What they're hoping this does is also draw some kids into the music side with the idea of the fall of 23 going forward in the spring of 24, potentially being able to do a marching band with a color guard. At which point you could be looking at kind of Benton City entry into the cavalcade bands for the first time in a long time.
Well, maybe in a long time, but I guess
In a
we
long
were there.
Yeah. I really do commend the music staff for trying to think outside of the box as a way to get kids into their program. The fiscal impact is not significant, including 2 $1,000 coaching stipends. We're talking about it in the realm of between $5,000 and $7,000. Quite frankly, that's not a huge price to pay to get 15 to 20 kids who are not involved in any other activities to be able to find a niche and then to potentially grow more and more. I think it was very interesting to note that of the 17 kids, one of them was a current high school student, but 8 of them were 8th graders going to be freshmen next year. So I think we have the potential to turn this into a high turnout non-athletic activity. This would not fall under our sports activities formally, as it is seen as an activity and not a sport. However, the competitions that would be out there, they would still be representing County of Benton City High School, wearing our colors, and I think it's a very positive step. And because it does have some fiscal backing, I would like to ask the board for their input and whether we allow them to move forward with it. Would be my recommendation that we do. I think for the dollars involved, but the numbers of kids, as well as some of the fundraising opportunities to try and defray some of those costs, I don't think that they'll have any problem covering a majority of these costs outside of the district dime, so to speak.
So we're gonna try to combine middle school and high school and have one organization, or are you gonna try to separate them? Or?
The idea to begin with would be to combine. And there would not be any issues as far as many times you'll hear talk about, well, if we don't have enough kids on a varsity softball team or a varsity tennis team, we can bring up 8th graders. Because this isn't a WIAA sanctioned sport, we have none of those issues. So we can include middle school and high school students on the same team without any issues. Do I think the potential is there? If we can get enough kids to do 2 separate, I think it's worth a look, but I also think that's probably 3 or 4 years down the line. But yeah, involve as many kids as possible.
So it'll be under the auspices of the music program versus like cheerleading.
Correct.
Well, I consider myself very cost conscious, but I really like the idea of supporting kids that may not fall into another activity, opening more opportunities for extracurriculars for our students. So I think it's a good idea, and it's not an outrageous amount of money. Pretty low investment.
There are lots of people interested in dance. We have no.
Correct. Very correct. And we also have a very, one of the things that our staff told us was, we've got the support of the music boosters, and I know they're looking at ways to augment the district coffers in that respect. So I think this is a win-win to give it a shot.
I am curious why they chose to start with color guard and not start with marching band. Do you know what the thought process was like?
I kind of thought along the same lines. I think the main thing was the idea that if they could get a group of kids who aren't involved out for something, that they, quite frankly, might be able to talk more kids into not just the performance aspect from the dancing standpoint, but increase the number of kids turning out for music in general, who want to continue on past 5th grade and into middle school when they see their friends that are going out and twirling. Well, if you keep playing the trumpet or if you keep playing the drums through your middle school and high school years, then you guys can all be going to the same parades, the same competitions, those types of things.
Okay, all for it. No nays?
Anything to get more kids involved and
Okay, then we'll move on to high school sports summer activities.
And finally, this is the standard request that I have of the board, and you can see that Lance, Mr. Denboer, has put forward all of the summer high school activities as required by the WIA, all the camps and things like that. So I would simply ask that, as has been done the past few years, for the board to approve those summer activities so he can send that off to the WIA and let them know what we're doing.
Pretty significant.
There's a lot of stuff going on, yes. It is definitely, we can see from the amount of opportunities that in that respect, we're moving past COVID. Knock on wood.
Any discussion, comments? Questions?
I'd love to see a
In
summer
favor.
baseball program. Get the interest there, that would be good.
Agreed.
We're a league champ.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, well, the chair would entertain a motion to approve.
And we'll move to approve the high school sports summer activities.
All right, well then I'll
You do it.
second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Aye. Okay,
Excellent, thank you.
takes care of our business. That moves us into board comments.
Well, speaking of sports, I want to congratulate our baseball team and our other spring sports teams. I was able to take my two toddlers to the last game there, which unfortunately we didn't win that one, but we were able to move on, win another game. And some great defensive plays in that game that I was able to attend. I sat out behind the left field fence so my toddlers could run around in the grass there. So, but great view, great activities, proud of them. And I also want to congratulate Coach McCarty on his role. I was able to participate in the interview process, listen in on those. So I'm glad to have some great candidates for soccer coach, and congrats to Coach McCarty.
And we have two individuals heading to state.
Correct.
That's good to know too. Yep. To see.
I'm not sure they were 100%. I'm not sure that we saw those coming, to be quite frank. Lance was very excited this morning.
They excelled at the right time.
Exactly.
Well, I enjoyed my tour of the middle school. I really appreciate all the teachers welcoming me in and letting me check out their rooms, and saw some really great things going on. I'm looking forward to our next dual language task force meeting, which is, I believe, Thursday this week. I have to double check that. Might be the next one.
yeah,
But I thought I'd just use the opportunity just to put the word out if there's any families with young kids who would be interested in that dual language program. It would be great to get some more parents on the task force with us. So we'll contact with Chris or any principal if you'd like to join us. We'd love to have more input.
And this is really our last full board meeting before school's out.
Crazy as that sounds.
Looking forward to graduation in a normal setting.
Absolutely.
Oh, and also thank you to Andrew and Nona for taking Julie and I through some financials. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago?
it's all running together.
Yeah. Just on Friday.
But yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? Okay, we'll go into the superintendent's report.
All right, well, thank you. I feel like I've been talking nonstop, but this will touch on a couple pertinent issues that we didn't cover. So first off, met with directors this morning, and we have our facilities inventory completed.
Oh, wow.
And Mr. Rodriguez is going to have that, he promised, sitting on my desk on Friday, at which point we'll disseminate that out and we'll have that as part of the checkout process for, excuse me, for teachers to be able to verify everything that's in their room that we recently saw was in their room. So hopefully there won't be a lot of discrepancies, but it was a big job to get a baseline. And so that's been completed. So we're ready for the next step. Just a reminder to everyone, if it's not already on your calendars, we've got a band and choir concert tomorrow night, beginning at 6:30. There is also on Wednesday, PAC meeting for our migrant group, our migrant parents. Now, while this is at the ESD technically, we have had a lot more success with our parents coming here to the boardroom. So we will be Zooming with our parents here. Emma Quinones will be moderating that as we will all be returning from the state inclusion conference for the inclusion grant that we got. We're leaving tomorrow night and then coming back Wednesday evening. So Emma will be taking care of that in her role as migrant coordinator. I want to commend Ms. Hanson and her team. We were able to do 2 dual language site visits. Went to Kennewick, and I forget the schools. Eastgate Elementary. Took a look at the dual program there. I think one of the more interesting pieces of that conversation was that as much as we at times think of the fact that we're a little newer to this, we're not as far down the road. I know that Ms. Hanson and Ms. Zavala would concur. We've got some of the same stuff happening in our classrooms here. So our next goal is just to make it more systemic and easier to carry through from year to year. With that being said, then we finalized a date, and you all are invited if you so want to, but we will be training all administrators and secretaries in the district on PowerSchool on June 8th at 2 o'clock. Well, I know that doesn't necessarily work for most of your schedules. I want to at least offer it out there. We've got some excited folks. The folks who were a part of the implementation team are super excited and have talked about the fact that this will be a game changer for us from an ease of use standpoint. We just wanted to get all administrators and secretaries trained prior to the end of the year. David has set up our sandbox, quote unquote, and that is a separate server that is an exact duplicate of our school system. We have passwords for all employees that are going to be ready to be sent out so that people can literally go in the sandbox and play. And no matter what they do, no matter what buttons they push, they can't erase any data on a permanent basis. It's reset every night, so it comes back no matter how many times you delete Drew or myself, we come back the next day. So it's good to be knowing though that we can get that out to staff before they leave for the summer. And then David has a set of trainings that are available to any staff member at their leisure that they can go through over the summer on their own time. And then we will be planning the full implementation and full training of all staff when we come back mid-August. So it's very exciting. This has been, for me, a long time in the works, but from an official standpoint, the last year in the works. And kudos to David and his crew.
What time was it?
That will be at 2 o'clock here in the boardroom on June 8th.
Will it be on Teams by chance?
No, because it will require people
Be on.
to be on a computer at the same time so that they can access. The board, I forwarded to the board our audit results. And kudos to Drew and to Mona. and all of our staff at the district office. We came up with a clean audit, no findings. To be honest, with the amount of transition that we've had, there were some tense moments, but they really came through. And I have to say, Drew and Mona, for their first audit under these circumstances, it was a stressor and a stretch for them. They came through with flying colors. So very proud of them. And as we like to say, with that one has ended, and so now we're planning for next year's. So very, very happy with their teamwork though. We have 117 students registered for TK through 5 summer school right now. So we're looking at big numbers again. We anticipate, as you know, there are always a group of parents and kids who they don't start thinking about summer school till the last day of school is over. So we start on the 15th, and I would anticipate that number jumping some there. You should have seen invitations that went out to all staff, of course, for graduation on the 4th. And that's really the end of any of the nuts and bolts that I have. However, I would ask, I know that we need to do a workshop for our initial budget report that Drew and Mona are working away on. So we can schedule that as a precursor to our next official board meeting, which is on June 13th. So we could do, say, a 5:30 to 6:25 open session, or we could do it at a different time, or we can start earlier. I wanted to really just throw that out to the board and see what your calendars look like, see what your availability is like, because we also have the option of doing a work session. As the board knows, at any time that all of our calendars coincide, we simply publish it. And if 9 o'clock on a Friday morning works better, or 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon works better, we can make that happen too. We'll start with the budget, and then we'll go into other potential workshop options.
Well, if it works for the board, because an hour's kind of rushed.
Yeah.
If we could do a Friday or a Saturday. Could have a little bit more time.
I am not available until the 7th of June. We're out of town the 1st week of June.
Okay.
I mean, I'm available this Friday. But being said, it's a holiday weekend, probably not.
And are you gonna be ready this Friday or?
Come on, Drew.
He's looking forward to a day off.
I know that we have, with our next board meeting being on the 13th, I am correct on that, right? Okay, thank you. Could we look at maybe Friday the 10th? I know that that's the last day of school for everybody else in the district except for us. We'll be working as normal, so we could certainly set that up for. Didn't you just say you were going to be back to 7?
I'll be home for 3 days, then I'm gone for a day. And then I'm gone.
Saturday the 11th?
I can do that.
How's everybody else's calendar look?
That works for me.
Early.
I think that should work. Earlier the better.
Yeah. Like 7.
7 a.m.
Might be just right. But wouldn't interfere too much with farm work.
Having grown up on a farm, I know
That's
it
true.
will always be there.
I'm good with 9.
I'm sorry?
Graduation.
Happy some graduation.
It's a good point.
Does it have to be before our next?
I really think one of the things that we've talked about in our previous work sessions, and I'm thinking specifically when we had Becky here, we had Darcy here, Mr. Weisner. One of the things we were talking about is just making sure that any budgetary questions are answered in the work session as opposed to the public session where we would be presenting it to the community at large. So I think it would be wise if we were able to do something on the 11th. And while Dale may kick me under the table, we could push that, say 8:30 or 9.
Yeah, that's
Is that okay? 9, Teddy?
I don't, I could maybe make it. We're staying in Walla Walla on the 10th. I don't know what time we'll be home on the 11th.
I see what you mean. So tentatively. And I'm looking at Rosario, but of course, Mr. Gonzalez isn't here this evening, so we'll want to make sure and be able to check with him. There's obviously no guarantee. She gave the thumbs, if Rosario gave the thumbs up, it should be good.
She's scheduling right now.
So I tell you what, why don't we tentatively schedule for 9 o'clock? I'll stay in communication with Teddy. If we need to move it to a 9:30 or 10, we can probably be coerced.
I'll bring brunch instead of donuts.
There, okay. Now you're talking. So do you want to just say 9:30 and call it? And just say, well, this is where we're going, and if Teddy can make it, she can make it, she's gonna bring brunch.
And if I don't make it, I'll have it delivered.
There you go.
How's that?
And quite frankly, that gives you enough time, Teddy, if you realize you simply aren't gonna make it, because we can put you on speaker if you're still in Walla Walla, or if you're literally still in Walla Walla, you can jump into Zoom, we can have it that way as well.
9 o'clock.
Yeah, now that we have to,
9:30.
let's go 9:30 and we'll start at 9:30. June 11, Saturday. And so we'll publicize a budget workshop for the board on Saturday, June 11th at 9:30 here in the boardroom. And then are there any other topics that the board would like? Let's open things up until, quite frankly, we're practically talking the middle of June right now. So I would say, I know Josh has a desire to potentially talk about some CTE options and get a bigger picture view of that and some short-term and long-term goals. We could set that up for July or late June. Our board meeting in July, I believe, is the 26th, 25th of July. So prior to that board meeting, sometime between the 10th of July and the 22nd, sometime in there. I would ask that I'll get in touch with Keely and see when she might be available. By that time, we'll also have a very good handle on what classes we're going to be offering at the high school level. I would probably say in that regard, we may be able to do that one just prior to that board meeting on the 25th at 5:30, depending on her availability. So very, very tentative, not kind of tentative like the one we just talked about, but very tentatively, I'll check with Keely and see if we can make that happen before our next board meeting in July. Is there any other topic the board would like me to look at?
Be a good start.
I agree. Okay. Okay, and with that, that's the end of my superintendent report.
All righty. No, that ends our meeting then. We will go into an executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-110 for 30 minutes, which puts us about 8:15 or so by the time we get started. So then after that, there will be no business to follow. We'll be adjourned. Thank you very much for contributing.
Guys, thank you